Here's an interesting thing that has also come out on sort of on the topic of like these Westerners selling out to China. Bloomberg just came out with a piece about why we should support China's zero COVID policy. And like, this is stunning. This came out recently. This wasn't like something that they dropped like a year and a half ago. This was in the past couple of days.
Yeah, and the reason they said it was kind of transparently selfish in a way, right? Because it was like, well, if we want to not have more supply chain issues and delays and things coming from China, then we should support the zero COVID policy because China's going to have such a hard time opening up because their vaccines aren't as good, et cetera.
Well, it was also like a takedown of the whole idea of lockdowns, that like, oh, you know, as soon as they're out of lockdowns, the virus is going to spread like crazy and then supply chains will shut down.
What do you mean it's a takedown of lockdown? Isn't that saying lockdowns work?
Well, no, not long term. It's
right.
like saying that, like, yeah, we all know that, like, this isn't a solution. As soon as we come out of lockdown, it's going to spread anyways, and that's not something you're supposed to say.
Well, I think that that's definitely something that the Chinese Communist Party has not talked about. Is that like how they're going to get out of zero COVID? Like, it's pretty much like we're going to be in zero COVID forever because we're going to stamp it out with zero COVID.
Mm-hmm. Everyone will get to keep that health tracking app that we talked about in that episode where, you know, if for some reason you want to travel somewhere and you're Chinese dissident, your health code goes from green to red.
And to be clear, it's not a vaccine passport. It's not even a contact tracing app because the point of this app is actually to track your movements all the time and to control where you can go. So it's not a contact tracing app that like lets people know or lets you know if you've been somewhere and you might be like exposed to COVID, right? It's actually just like if you have a yellow or red thing, you can't go anywhere. Which
is also why it's so creepy that Bloomberg is like, yeah, this zero COVID policy, we should support it. It's like we should support their authoritarianism.
For them, because it makes the rest of our lives better. Like it was just mind-blowingly terrible.
It's basically like saying, I love slave labor in foreign countries because that makes my products slightly cheaper.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I'm glad it's happening there. Obviously, we wouldn't want it in America because that's wrong. But like in like Vietnam, whatever, like that's fine. It's the same thing. And I guess I don't understand how people can have that disconnect where like, it's wrong to treat people a certain way here in America, but it's okay to treat them badly if they're somewhere else. Like, how does that work? Like, you know, aren't these people supposed to be citizens of the world?
I mean, I think that people would say, well, it's bad to have slave labor there, but there's nothing we can do about it.
But there's lots of things we can do about it.
Like stop buying stuff made in China?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd think that this would be if you're worried about continued supply chain issues, and like that might be a sign that maybe it's time to diversify your supply chain.
I think it is. I think it's time.
So Bloomberg, you know, releases this article that could basically have been written by the People's Daily.
Oh, yes, that's right. I know where this is going.
And then the People's Daily publishes an article called "World Should Support China's Zero COVID Policy, Bloomberg." And it was basically just 4 paragraphs of exact lifting of the Bloomberg article.
Which is often how Chinese state-run social media works. They get foreign press to say something in line with party propaganda, and then party propaganda says, hey, they said it.
We didn't say it. They said Bloomberg said it. And
what was circle of life.
And what was funny is that like every paragraph in this article was probably the easiest article this propaganda worker ever had to write, right? Which was just like literally pulling paragraphs from the Bloomberg article, ignoring the ones where they talked about China has a problem, and just saying like how great the zero COVID policy is, and then just adding the report says at the end of every paragraph.
Because of the closed internet, nobody reading the People's Daily article is going to be able to get to the original article.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think they would, but
VPNs are free.
You know, they're literally free. But the funny thing is they forgot to do it a couple times. So they just literally put the exact same paragraph that was in, like, copy pasted the exact same paragraph in the Bloomberg article as part of the People's Daily article. It was pretty beautiful to watch that happen. And I was like, the circle of propaganda, the loop has closed.
Bloomberg. For the media company started by the man who said Xi Jinping is not a dictator.
Well, Bloomberg also got in trouble about 10 years ago for actually censoring their own reporting.
On China.
Yeah. They killed a story by one of their reporters because they were afraid it was going to get them into trouble with the Chinese leadership.
Yeah. You actually asked him directly about that.
I was at a press conference. It was an unrelated press conference, and I was there, and I asked Michael Bloomberg, who was then, the mayor of New York City, and I asked him about that. And then he basically tried to flip it on me and accused me of like making stuff up and like all these things. Like I felt personally attacked. And I was like, this is a really interesting response to my question.
Yeah.
How did he try to attack you?
It was like almost 10 years ago.
Well, I remember he was like, and it's I've divested any control over Bloomberg News, and you should get your facts right.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like that thing. He didn't be like, oh, you look like a monkey. It wasn't like that kind of attack. It was just, like accusing me of being a bad reporter or that kind of thing. And yes, like as mayor, Michael Bloomberg had to technically divest himself of his corporate positions, right? So you can't be a mayor and actively run a news site. But the reality is that you never fully can divest, right? And this is, interestingly, this is the same argument that people used to attack Trump, which is that like you can say, oh, as president, you're technically divested from, the Trump organization or whatever, right? He's not actively running hotels and brands and all those things. Right. But they're like, oh, but it still has your name. So you still like at some level have control over it because you hired the people and all that stuff and you're responsible. And I think there's some truth to that argument. And there's also some truth to that argument with Michael Bloomberg. So like, yeah, you're responsible for the news organization you created. And, in Michael Bloomberg's case, it was probably clear that after his third term as mayor, he would go back to having, some position where he's actively running things again. So I don't think it's fair for him to say he's totally blameless for what his organization does. And on top of that, all the top management of his organization understand that while Bloomberg Media is technically separate from Bloomberg LP that does the terminals, those are the investment terminals. And that's like their main source of money, right? Providing real-time stock and other financial data, right? Like their big business model relies on having those terminals sold in China and getting access to real-time data from the Chinese markets, right? That's part of their global business. And that's the main way that the company makes their money. And so the media company that's tied to Bloomberg understands that there is this relationship, and getting kicked out of China would mean not just the news getting kicked out of China, but potentially everything getting kicked out of China.
I mean, that's the reason that they killed the story, right?
Right. Well, no, Bloomberg is afraid of getting kicked out of China, period. Also, they killed a story that was critical of Chinese leaders. There's two dots.
It's not my job to connect them.
It is not, yeah.
Well, I think those dots are a lot closer than the other dots.
Yeah, well, in this case, Michael Bloomberg accused me of getting my facts wrong for connecting the dots that should not have been connected in his view.
He really hurt you, didn't he?
He did. He hurt my feelings. I'm very sensitive. I have a very fragile ego. It's very large, but also very fragile. It's a tough life being me.